It's my pleasure, on behalf of the Complementary Medicine Association, the CMA, to introduce to you a speaker who has many, many years of experience in complementary medicine and matters which she herself can express too much more readily than I. She's the author of a book, Sarah's Last Wish, a book that is out there and is recommended reading. Without any further fuss, I would like to introduce for you Hilary, and I, for one, look forward to what she has to say. I'm sure you'll find it very interesting. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you so much to the Complementary Medicine Association for inviting me here this morning. I'd like to just give you a very brief introduction of how I became to come into this field of complementary medicine. In 1969, I started my career in pediatrics, and it was a very different world then. I very much liked my career and ended up in the 1990s in intensive care unit, neurosurgical intensive care at the Royal North Shore Hospital. When my own health challenge came at that time, and it was a serious one, and I looked to the medical science for answers. And for me, there were very few answers in medicine for what I had. And I therefore suffered greatly for a number of years with chronic and degenerative illness, until one day I discovered a practitioner in integrative medicine, and that was a doctor who was trained both in medicine and actually in complementary medicine, and they were very rare and still are. But through adding complementary medicine to conventional medicine, I began to recover, and that journey of recovery got me my life back and my productivity. I had lost most things that a person could lose through illness, and my whole life was now open again for me to go and take it somewhere. I wrote a book at that stage, and I also made a decision to go back to university and study complementary medicine. After I had finished, I decided that I wanted to offer my patients the very best of both worlds. And I opened up with a medical partner in 2000 a integrative medicine clinic where we offered some extraordinary treatments, both conventional medicine and complementary medicine, which I did. And together we founded an intravenous clinic where I put the hospital intensive care protocols into effect, and we administered very safely and with astonishing results intravenous vitamin C, glutathione, chelation therapy, and many other really exceptional things. Well, very soon we had many hundreds of patients who came to us. Many of them became long-term cancer survivors after they had come to us in stage 3 and 4. Many are still alive and well and have re-established their own lives. And some were terminal, but I have to say that the ones who came to us for integrated care, they had the very best quality of life, even to the very end. And they didn't suffer quite as much, not nearly as much, as the patients that I had seen in the hospital cancer wards. So be that as it may, because I felt so strongly at that time that in our society, in our healthcare system, that people didn't know that there were such amazing options. I decided to again go back to school and do some study and do a journalist's diploma, which I then did, and that started me on my writing career sometime in the late about 1996 or 97. I began to write some articles, and also some full feature articles that were published here and there, mainly health related. Now, I've come here today, this is a bit of an opener, but I've come here today to share something that I've been doing for 40 years with you, and that's tracking the healthcare system. And I believe that if we can understand where we've come from and what happened at certain junctures, important places, we can understand perhaps more about the solutions that we can all apply to the problems. But back in 1969, in the pediatric hospital where I trained, there were no cancer wards. In fact, we had very few children with cancer, and the ones that did have cancer, we had in a medical ward or a surgical ward, depending on their particular needs for treatment. We also had very few, in fact, autism and ADD were exceptionally rare, in fact. I had seen in probably 6 or 7 years in pediatrics amongst thousands of children, maybe 1 or 2 children at this problem in the late 60s and the 70s. Virtually just a few child diabetics. Rheumatoid arthritis, very occasionally. Certainly anaphylaxis was a problem that almost didn't occur. I saw no child with an anaphylaxis. In the early 70s, I began to see some in the mid-70s. Certainly, I didn't see anaphylaxis in those days. The other thing that was very noticeable was that in those days there were only 3 vaccinations. There was basically oral polio and your DPT at that time. And sometimes mums just didn't bring their kids back for boosters. So your kids ended up maybe getting 1 shot, maybe none, and a couple of oral polios. Lifestyle was different. There were virtually no fast foods. For example, we used to have next to the hospital a deli. We used to call it Greasy Joe's. We'd go down there for hamburgers. But, you know, when you ordered a hamburger from Greasy Joe's, well, you got beetroot and lettuce and egg and all sorts of yummy things. It might have been a bit greasy, but at least it had proper oil in it and not cottonseed oil from GMO crops. So, by and large, you saw kids in those days that had healthy complexions and red cheeks, by and large. The culture was different because there were a lot more stay-at-home mums, and there was a culture of cooking. And there was an old joke, 3-veg, meat and 3-veg. Well, you did usually get meat and 3-veg at the table. And kids, by and large, maybe they didn't like 1 or 2 of the veg, but they pretty well had to eat them, and did eat them. And that was back in those days, 40 years ago. And you know, there really weren't that many sick kids around, particularly kids with a lot of these chronic diseases there are now today. Well, let's fast forward a little bit. The generation I was talking about that got away with good health was Generation X. And then there was another generation, Generation Y. Now, let's go and fast forward to the 1990s, to Generation Z, I think it is. What happened in the 1990s? Well, a lot of things actually happened. First of all, there was the introduction of genetically modified organisms. I know this very well because I lived in Canberra at the time, and the authorities were about to license major broadacre crops. And the first license they issued was in 1996, from memory. And I was down there in Parliament House trying to prevent this. Not just me, but a lot of my colleagues were very concerned about this new development and the lack of research, and the research that did exist actually turned out that these organisms were not terribly good for animal health. However, despite this, the government issued several licenses for several GMO crops, and that was the beginning of the crops, the GMO invading the Australian food chain. Eventually, most of the, or at least over 50% of the highly processed foods in Australian supermarkets did GMO, And certainly animal feeds were almost exclusively of GMO products because they were a lot cheaper. So through the food chain then came the GMOs. And the fast foods, I don't have to tell anybody, and I don't have to name the names of the fast food joints. I think we all know the streets lined with these fast food outlets. We now have 2 parents working, so kids are eating a lot more of these.